Hey, what's up YouTube? Mass Mechanics here. Hey, today is the day we're going to put our 6.0 LSX motor in our 74 C3 Corvette. So like, subscribe, and sit back and watch, and let's get it all together. Now we're starting to clean up this disaster. I've already wiped it down once quickly. But as you can see, this is just off the transmission, all this nice grease. So we went ahead and gave her a good wash. Don't worry, I'm going to tear the transmission apart anyways. We'll do the shift kit and all that good stuff, new seals. Don't have to worry about that leaking anymore and making this disaster of a mess again. You don't need that. And after pressure washing that, we went over to the Corvette and really got in there and pressure washed the heck out of it because it was just really nasty, caked full of grease. So now it's all cleaned up. Definitely makes a big difference when you get rid of all that cake from the leaks that have been there for God only knows how many years. But I'm glad it's all cleaned up. Now there's going to be a lot of cleaning ahead of us and get ready for painting the engine bay and getting it look good. So that way we can get that nice engine in there and everything will look good and clean and nice. And if you notice, I tag all the wires. I do that, you know, it's pretty simple to figure out where everything goes in these cars because there's not that many. But it's just easier, especially once you got another engine in there and you're running an EFI harness or something. It's just nice to have things tagged, easier to hook up, and then it takes a lot of guesswork out. Alright guys, transmission time. So this is a Turbo 400. It's an original 74 out of the car. It has only 35,000, 34,000, I don't remember. It's really low mileage, but it leaks like crazy, as you could see from having to pressure wash it and scrape it. But I wasn't too worried about moisture getting in because I had to take it apart anyways. Because I'm going to put a mild shift kit in it. You don't have to go with a crazy shift kit on a Turbo 400 with this powertrain because the engine isn't making absurd amounts of torque. I mean, you're still going to be under 500 foot-pounds, and being that this car and this transmission was rated for a big block factory, it's not that far off from the factory big block torque spec. And torque is kind of what you go off of with the tranny. Usually they give you a horsepower rating, but torque is really the one that breaks these things. So a Turbo 400 is a pretty strong transmission to begin with, which is good, but I got to put a mild shift kit in just to get the shifts a little quicker, get the line pressure a little better, so that way I don't have to worry about it slipping in between shifts and really burning up the thing. Because like I said, it is a low mileage unit and it's original to the car, and I did hold on to the original engine just for matching numbers down the road if for some reason I ever sold the thing. But chances are good that's never going to happen. But it's just a good thing to do because that is the original engine, and I have all the rest of the parts to dress that thing factory. So might as well keep it all original if you can. So anyways, just to preserve the transmission a little bit, I put a cheap mild shift kit in it just to try to give it a little better with a good torque converter. We should be just fine. So now I'm going to start digging into it. So the first thing we got to do is take the filter off. It's pretty simple on these, just one bolt. Pops right off. And then there's a little seal in there you got to make sure it comes out too, because it's in there where the tube goes in. You just got to pull it out. I usually use a pick. With the filter out of the way, you can really see the valve body. So you just, I like to crack them all loose before I start really going too crazy with taking every bolt out. It's just because it's cast iron, and I always get nervous with that kind of thing. So you don't want to crack it or warp or have a problem. So I just crack them all first, then I spin them all out. That way we can get that valve body off and see what we're working with. There are quite a few bolts in these things, and there are two different sizes. So just be aware of that. Don't try to force one in if you're putting it back together, because you're going to strip it. It's probably the wrong bolt. It's simple though. I mean, I've worked on a lot of transmissions, and these are one of the easier ones, which is nice. It makes it quick for this kind of thing. You can get it done. But then you got the little solenoid there in the bottom. You got to get that off, because that goes right into the plate that's under the valve body. You just grab the two lines that are attached in there and pull it right down. Not too bad. I like to tip it on its side so the check balls don't fall out too. Alright, now looking at the valve body, we got a gasket, and there's the plate. That we had to take that little solenoid thing off there, so that way we could get to it and get that out of the way. There's another gasket underneath that you can see. Those are really hard to get off typically. You usually got to scrape them. Now we're going to work on the accumulator piston. You push down real hard and pull that little clip off. And then there's the spring. With this shift kit, I'm taking the spring out. And then I'll put the piston back in and I'll put a new clip on. Get rid of that one. Alright, now I'll get that new clip on. Get rid of the old one. Takes a little bit of pressure, but then it'll pop right on. You want it to be tight. And now we're on to the more miserable gasket to get off from the valve body. I don't know why these are always more difficult. Maybe it's because of the type of metal they're attaching to, but they're always really hard to get off. I try to scrape around the outside and try to pull it off as one sheet if you can. So that way you're not scraping off little tiny pieces, and then you got to clean them all out of the channels to make sure nothing gets plugged up in the valve body while it's running, because then you won't shift right. So just more scraping and more pulling and more scraping, and finally you get the whole thing off. It just takes a little bit of time, that's all. And then just make sure you go over it and don't leave any debris or residue, and you'll be all set for the new one when it's time. Well, almost got it all off in one piece, but not quite, unfortunately. But it's not too bad. This one came off all right. Alright, well now we're on to our new separator plate for the valve body from our kit. And then we got to drill a couple of holes in it to change your flow for whatever you decide to pick for intensity of your shifts. So the separator plate's drilled out, and now we're pulling out the few check balls. I believe there's 6 of them, and we have to pull 3 out. So I like to use the magnet. Like I said, I put the transmission on its side like that so the check balls don't fall out when we take the valve body off. It makes it easy. And then you just pick whatever ones you need to take out, and you pop them out with the magnet. I'm cleaning up a little of the extra ATF that came out so I can start thinking about putting a new gasket on. And this is your little piston thing here on the solenoid. There's a little flat disc. Make sure it's there. Alright, what I'm going to do here now is I got the new gasket that's going in. I got a little bit of Vaseline on my fingertip, and I'm using that and rubbing it on there so that way the gasket will stick in place while we can start fitting everything else on. We won't have to worry about it falling off or moving. So yeah, a little bit of Vaseline goes a long way on these things. It really helps a lot when you're putting together transmissions. I always tell people, use it. Alright, so we got the first gasket on. There's our new plate, and I already Vaseline the second gasket onto that. Just a couple little dabs here and there in the corners and stuff so that way it won't fall. Now when we're putting the plate on, I always put a couple bolts in so the plate doesn't fall off while we're putting the rest of the thing together. So we'll get a couple bolts started just so it won't move and all the holes will be lined up. Get those threaded in. Now we'll go on to our little solenoid thing here so we can bolt that on. That has its own little gasket, so make sure you get that on. And it's got its own bolts too that are a different length than all the others. To use that, and then we'll thread that into the plate. Get them in there moderately tight so the plate's not going to move around a bunch on us. Then we can back our other bolts out so we can put our valve body on, and that the 2 bolts we just put in will hold it there. Get rid of the excess ATF on there just so it doesn't make a big mess. Now it's time to put the valve body in. So you want to line those 2 tubes up, that's for sure. Get those in nice and square first. I always just get those in first before I even worry about where the valve body is going to go. Then I'll get that lined up. Put a couple bolts in. There's also a plunger you have to line up for the shift lever. So make sure you get that in while your valve body is loose. That's what I'm doing right here. Alright, now we got the bolts in. We're going to start running them all down and put them all down the torque spec. I don't remember what the spec is exactly. You can always look it up. It's pretty easy in this day and age. Just Google it. Also, make sure that you have all the bolts in the right spot, like I said earlier, because they are there's two different ones. And then on that shift lever side there, make sure you got the one with the little roller onto the lever, so that way you have that that locking mechanism for your shift lever. Well, valve body's all set, and I threw the filter on and just the old pan for now until the tranny's in. So it's time to start replacing the rear seal. So this is a seal puller here. You're trying to get behind the seal to get it to pull out. You don't want to go in too deep with it and catching the tranny, because it's not going to go anywhere. But that's what the seal looks like. That's about how thick it is. So you got to try to get behind that lip. So you just try to finally get a good bite on it and just keep wrapping on it, and finally there it is, pops right out. Then you got a bunch of fluid that was behind the seal, so you're going to want to wipe that all out nice and clean before you can put in the new seal. Make sure there's no grit or dirt in there either, because it likes to get right on the edge there. Then we'll pop our new seal in. I use an old socket here. I think this is for one of an axle nut or something, for a pickup. I don't remember, but I know it's the right size for the seal, so we're going to use it for that. Just drive it in, tap on each side, all the way around, nice and smooth. You're not trying to wrap it hard. These are just little tiny soft taps just to get it to lay flush and you're not pounding on it. Then we got our yoke here. Put a little grease on it so when it spins it won't tear up the seal when it's brand new. And then slide it right in. Now that everything's nice and clean, it's not too bad to work. You can see I put the new urethane transmission mount on there too. Alright, well, with the transmission all wrapped up, I did do the front seal too. It's the exact same way. It's just a little bit more difficult because the bell housing's in the way. I did put the transmission in the car already. I couldn't really film it and put it in at the same time. It just wasn't doable. But there it is. And I didn't put the nice aluminum pan on it yet either, because as you can see, there's a jack there. So I got the whole frame all cleaned up, and it's all painted with heavy epoxy, so I don't have to worry about it. I didn't do the control arms that great because I have to pop them off and do bushings eventually in them. And when they're off, I'll just put them in the blast cabinet, get them all cleaned up nice, and paint them then. That way everything looks better. But yeah, she's looking good. Got everything out of the way, and transmission lines are getting run in there. Put it in. Here's a moment of truth. Got it off the engine stand. It's hanging on the hoist. And we're getting ready to put it in. Unfortunately, I can't film that great because I can't do the camera and all the other angles and stuff at the same time. But I'll show you as much as I can. Alright, wow, here we are. Engine and transmission are bolted together, and engine mounts are in. Definitely some more things to get done before I can button this thing up. But we're in the car, and we are bolted together. And the first thing I went to bolt on was a water pump, and of course it did not fit. So we had to pull out those two tubes that come out of the side, and as you can see, we're tapping it right now with I can't remember what size they are. I know one's like 5/8 and maybe the other one's 3/4, something like that. They're good size pipe thread. So we're getting those holes tapped nice, and then I'll get some fittings in there, because otherwise those two lines went directly into the control arm, so that wasn't going to work too good. So I'm going to have to put like a 90-degree bend on them, and then I'll be able to run them up to my heater hoses. This is one of those things that just happen when you're doing an engine swap. You never know what's going to be in the way until you get there, and that's what happened here. It wasn't that big of a deal. It's just one more thing to add to the list, right? That's how these type of builds always go. But at least we had the right tools and the ability, so that's good. All right, so we got the water pump back in and started putting on some of the accessory stuff just to check clearances, and so far so good. We got a little bit of power steering pump issues we got to move around and do a little bit of clearancing, but nothing serious. Now you can see how tight it is to that control arm of that water pump, so now you know why I got to do those fittings. But yeah, it's a relief. It's in there. Everything fits. The engine mounts went great. And stay tuned, guys, for the next video. I'm going to have it so I can get this thing all wired in with the new EFI unit, get that all set up, and done. So please, guys, like, subscribe, follow along. We're the Mass Mechanics. Check us out.